Hi, everybody. It's Amalia, founder of S.T.E.M Braids and Beyond, and host of the Silver Bullet S.T.E.M podcast. Today, I have an incredible guest to introduce to the audience. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Cleo Martin. I am from Tampa, Florida, born in St. Louis, Missouri, but raised in Tampa, so it's home. I'm an engineer. I like to typically just go by that title because of the many hats that I've worn in my career and my journey. Um, it's the background. My bachelor's is in engineering physics, and my master's is in an electrical engineering degree with a focus in systems. So, with that, my career has not perfectly reflected my education in that respect. It's been a unique journey. I've worked in mechanical engineering with the Navy. I've done see some research and development with the Army as a physicist. And then I've also worked in acquisition as a project manager. So you can imagine that's really evolved. And not to forget, I was in high school math instructor too. So that kind of was a huge shift, but it contributed to who I am as an engineer.
Oh, beautiful. How can anybody get in touch with you?
On LinkedIn, you can find me at Cleo, Cleao Martin.
Awesome. So, you've shared several jobs, and every job description changes. In terms of a science-based job, either engineering, physicist, what does a typical day in that job look like? Just to give us a closer look at what you did.
So it, that too was different. So when I worked for the Army, it was similar to being in a lab. There was a lot of computers and rendering different video footage and also conducting tests on different people coming into the lab space, and it had to do with night vision. So a lot of the work we did had to do with optics from a physics perspective in that respect. That was, like I said, more of a lab research and development in area. For the Navy, I like to say the ship's mechanic in a sense. You would typically, if I wasn't in the office, you'd see me in a hard hat with steel-toed boots and a tool belt. I focused primarily on propulsion systems for the surface ships in the Navy. And I'd be on the ship for 3 to 4 days performing testing and evaluation on the ship system, sometimes training different Navy men, and also assessing different parts that might become obsolete. Where can we find a new piece to replace that, and if it'll impact the system, how will it influence the system? In that respect. It was a pneumatic system, so I learned a lot about mechanical engineering, and my physics actually played a role in my understanding of what I was doing there. But otherwise, I was in the office in my business clothes. So it really varied, and then now I'm majority of the time I'm in the office in business casual attire. So it really varied. At one point in time, it was very hands-on, very immersive. And now I get to visit and see different kinds of technology where people are doing that. So it's a bit more of a general perspective and scope that I have now. But it's varied in terms of where I had to be when I had to be that kind of engineer.
Awesome. How did you get into S.T.E.M?
So let's see, how did I get into S.T.E.M?
Were you a gifted student? Were you something in your environment to helped you in that direction like that?
Yeah. So I'd say that it was a combination, because in my mind, I was not gifted in that respect. I just had a very calculated way of thinking,
Yes.
very critical, calculated, and driven to problem solve, but also create.
Yeah.
So my mom and dad like to say I'm very much so a left and right brain child, because
Yes.
I I am literally a fusion of the creative as well as the analytical. And interesting, now that I'm talking about it in this respect, I reflect back also in thinking about how those two sides of me really interact with one another, because sometimes the analytical can be less creative,
Mhm.
and very black and white, whereas the creative allows me to process beyond what I'm able to see or think about. So in middle school, I'd say, is where I initially really saw I loved science. This is where I wanted to be. And maybe before then a little bit, I knew about Bill Nye the Science Guy. I loved him. I never missed an episode of Bill Nye's episodes. And anything having to do with science, I was all about it. And then also things I didn't know was about science. I wanted Lego sets, and I didn't know that was connected to
Yes.
um, design and development.
Mhm.
But and then also I remember as a child, a lot of these types of toys, including a microscope, always had little boys on the front of them, and most times white boys. I don't think I've ever seen, what, as a child, a black boy or an Asian, Indian, any other
Yeah.
ethnicity. But I was more so, I was able to kind of ignore that optic and see the microscope. Like, this is cool. I know what it can do for me. And I was the kid in the backyard, just, I don't know. I was that child who, for up until 8, I was an only child. So it wasn't hard for me to find fun, and create my own little samples, my own little petri dishes of whatever I could find in the dirt, and look at it under a microscope. It was definitely a love I had for exploring and seeing the creative pieces of nature that wasn't clear to the naked eye. And then my middle school, I learned about Dr. Mae Jemison, um, first African American astronaut, and why I really fell in love with her story was because she was a multidimensional woman. Not only was she an astronaut, but she was a medical doctor. She was also a physicist. She became later an author, but before all of that, she was a dancer. And
Wow.
I'm a dancer. And
Oh.
so I had that aspect of, at one point in time, I pursued dance very seriously, to where I was traveling across the country to study. And I was sort of like, am I going to become a professional dancer, or like, is my heart pushing me towards science, technology, engineering, math? And again, at one point in time, the STEM term wasn't something coined until later. So I didn't know, like, all of those were a family of things. And then on top of that, I didn't know art could also be included in that. And now I hear the new term I'm hearing is stream, where people are including religion, which I'm sort of like, oh wow, this is mind blowing. I wouldn't knock it or anything. I haven't sat and processed with it, but I love that we're thinking well outside of the box. So it truly, at the time, was a calling I didn't know what to call. And I just knew well, if Dr. Mae Jemison could do it, I believe I could do it all also. And so I remember A Bug's Life first came out when I was a child. That was the very first Pixar animation. And I was like, this is a movie that looks like a video game. What in the world? You know, I started processing. I would love to be able to work on things like that, you know. So that's where it started for me. Fortunately, I had a set of parents who really exposed me to these things. So I was able to have an optic that was broadened by the things I had experienced and the people I learned about. But I'd say that's where it started heavily for me.
Um, we see on social media where everybody has this hype life, this celebrity life. Would you say STEM has afforded you a very comfortable lifestyle that you can be proud of without all of the spotlight we see, or the hype we feel like you need to be an entertainer or something to exist and live well?
It, so yes, STEM has definitely paved a way for me to become a healthy steward of my finances, right?
Yes.
I say that because I remember when I first had my big job as as an engineer, um, fresh out of college. I was not rolling in money at all. You know, still in student debt, still having to pay bills, still trying to find a way. And I graduated from Morgan State University in Baltimore.
No, really?
Yes, I did.
Around the corner from Morgan
Oh
State.
yeah. Look, I got my sweatshirt on too. I don't know if
Go ahead, girl.
so yeah, I stayed there. I stayed there for some years. And I remember freshly after college. So my mom's side is from the Caribbean and my dad's side is from Arkansas. And I remember my mother's father, my grandfather, he came to visit. And I was not living in the greatest area of Baltimore at the time. It was what I could afford. It was what it was. Fresh out of college. Bless you. And I just remember, first of all, this man wouldn't get out of the car. Lord have mercy. I was just like, is he gonna come in? I cleaned up the place. I made it nice. I was like, oh, he's gonna come see my space. No, it was a whole thing. So I remember him saying, Cleo, you went to school, got the degree. If you're unable to afford a life of just comfort and normalcy, you need to come back to Florida. Like, why? What's this? What is the point? Why are you doing this to yourself? You have family. Listen, it was a whole thing. And I was like, he doesn't see what I'm trying to do. I don't know, trying to be an adult. He
It's
wasn't
hot out here.
he wasn't hearing it. He really wasn't. So I remember thinking then, all right, I have to become better. I have to become more in tune with what I'm doing financially. And so it turned into like, all right, even though I'm making this amount of money, are you being responsible? Because what you do with a small amount of money reflects what you'll do with a large amount of money. So I can say I am comfortable and I live in a space where my husband and we can go travel time to time, we can do things and I'm still able to pay bills and take care of things and whatnot. So it took some time to get here, but because I won't lie, at one point in time, I was like, oh, this paycheck, what? Live like blah, 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 and do all these things. But it took some time to become responsible and not, be in a space of trying to keep up with the Joneses, you know. Um,
What I hear you saying though,
mhm.
and this is important to note because some people say if you go to college, you'll have all this debt and you'll never be able to live a comfortable life. I don't agree with that because having a college degree doubles how much money you can make, especially if it's a STEM degree. So
Mhm.
what I'm hearing you say is that your careers afforded you a very good salary, but you didn't know how to manage your money to be able to live
Correct.
a comfortable lifestyle. So, which is
Yeah.
a different thing to
Yes.
say that all this struggle came about because of a good check in
Correct.
actuality, and that's is an important part for the underrepresented entering STEM.
Yes.
It's good to get a degree and the opportunities, but you still have to be responsible with it so that a generation from now your kids aren't struggling like you did
Hmm.
when you were in
Yes.
the
Yes.
inner city.
Yes. Right. Because the misconception is just because you have the money,
Mhm.
you'll know how to manage it.
Right.
You know, but that's not the case at all. And thinking back to that time, I do think I could have still afforded a comfortable
Yeah.
lifestyle. I didn't have to be living where I was living at the time. But you know, without a college degree, in terms of making money, you can still hard work is required across the board, with or without, and that's my perspective of it.
Yeah, I love what you said. Hard work is required because some people say, but going to college is hard. I said working at Walmart is hard. Not
Okay.
being able to pay your bills is hard.
Yes.
So you get to choose the hard you want. Do you want a hard that gives you a comfortable life and
Hmm.
better future, or do you want a hard that you complain about your bosses and hard is life is hard.
Yes. And that's I just heard a comedian say, you know, money is actually not a real thing. It is simply a tool that we use to access resources. So you
That's
have more money, you can utilize that tool to access more resources. However, you know, you look at the market. Are you actually acquiring substantial or an efficient amount of money to support you to live comfortably? Sometimes in some states it's not, you know, that case. And truly people have the same paycheck and live in a smaller home in certain areas, whereas in another state they have that same paycheck and they have a pool in the backyard. It really depends on, you know, where you are, and of course what kind of resources you actually pour into.
What was your childhood like? I love the story you told about your dad not wanting to get out of the car because I know the side of Baltimore. I have an idea.
Hi. That
What was
was
your
so
childhood like?
embarrassing. I was like, dude, can you not? But
Listen,
yeah, it was a thing. My childhood, so as I said, my dad's from Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, and he'll talk about El Paso, Texas, and then my mom is from Antigua, born in England, in London, England, but from Antigua, and then she also had some life in St. Croix, and they finally came to the States, lived in Louisiana. So you can imagine, food in my house is wonderful. So they raised a foodie for real. Okay. It was truly a really colorful childhood, because I had the best of both worlds. Arkansas was really, well, both of my sides are very country. Like, let's just
yes.
put that out there. Okay.
Okay.
It's a different kind of country when you go to wherever you go, but they're both really country. And so that I like to say I'm a country girl because of that. You know, very grounded. And I was born with asthma, born with a lot of allergies. And
Mm,
so, interestingly enough, I was a bubble kid who
mm,
loved animals and grass. Okay.
mm,
So, there were a lot of things involved with making sure I, didn't rub my eyes. If I pet a dog, don't touch your face, rolling in the grass, I'm coming back congested. Um, but I enjoyed being truly a kid. My parents saw early, when we were living in St. Louis. As an infant, I had some breathing issues. The first doctor was like, nah, that's not true. Infants can't come into the world with illnesses. So that's how I'm not that old. This is the late 80s. A doctor is saying, no, that's not possible. So they went to a second professional, who then diagnosed me with asthma. And from there, they did their best bringing me up. My parents were very young when they had me, and very young when they got married, fresh out of college. They both met at Washington University in St. Louis. So I got to kind of see the college world, grow up with them and their friends. It was like a different world, living single, and I was the little baby living with them. Well, they weren't living single, they were married, but it was a world of young adults and trying to make it or start out in their professions. I got to see them early. Now my mom and dad's friends are attorneys and doctors, and it was really impressionable time for me. But we ended up leaving St. Louis because of the smog and because of the asthma. Dance, however, was a huge aspect that shifted how my asthma played a role in my life. I did West African dance, and then later my parents put me in like ballet, tap, jazz, but West African did something to my lungs to where I don't want to say I grew out of asthma, because later on